Welcome to the most unspoken and unbiased podcast around. Welcome to the Bulls Guys podcast. And here are the Bulls Guys. I'm your host, K Dub Kenyatta Wright, and here is my co-host, Mr. Greg Love. Got a show today, Greg. Bulls season didn't restart, but we're gonna go into some stuff with Lavine's contract. He was on theheavy.com. Theheavy.com quoted him saying some very disturbing news, depending on how you look at it as a Bulls fan. We're going to get into all of that right after this.
You're listening to the Bulls Guys podcast, where we talk about your Chicago Bulls and give an unbiased take. Thank you for listening, and like and subscribe.
All right, back on the Bulls Guys podcast. So, Greg, Zach Lavine was interviewed by The Heavy, and there was some comments that he made towards the Bulls as regarding his contract situation. Now, we all know Zach Lavine is due to be a free agent after the season, and he's due a max contract. And if he becomes all NBA, he's due extra amount of money on top of that max contract. And with the Bulls building the team the way that they have in the past year or so, many are, worried if this team will be able to retain Lavine. Now, I know they're going to be able to retain him. They wouldn't have brought these guys in if they couldn't retain him. But Lavine, going back to the Garpax era, seems to be a little bit disturbed, and my brother Greg is going to fill you guys in on that backstory.
Yeah, so going back 2018, Zach was eligible for an extension. Garpax was playing around, basically. He signed an offer sheet with the Kings. The Bulls decided to match it, so it was a 4-year, $78 million extension that the Bulls matched. And now his free agency is coming up now, and I think he just basically said that he really just wants to be respected. He is willing to kind of take a pay cut, but at the same time, he's not going to sign for the veterans minimum just to try to make it work. So the numbers we're looking at, if he chooses to try to sign with another team, he could get around $163 million over 4 years. This is from CBS reporting on this. He's eligible right now, like today, for a 5-year, $210 million contract from the Bulls. But if he earns all NBA honors, he could get the Supermax contract, which would be about $245 million over 4 years. So either way, it's a lot of money. Looking at their salary cap next year, he has a $29 million cap hold, depending on what the Bulls do. So basically, the way that works, it's not technically on the books, but if you look at it, it's held there. If the Bulls re-sign him, okay, it's added into their figure. If they do not, it's basically taken off as they're not paying his salary. So that's kind of how that works going forward.
I think when he hired Rich Paul and Clutch Sports, I think he made a mistake, man. I just feel like Clutch Sports has a conflict of interest going on their side, where we seen what happened this summer, Greg. We know that the Lakers were after DeMar DeRozan and chose to go with Russell Westbrook instead and got the bad end of the stick with that. We know that they offered Alex Caruso a contract lower than the amount that he wanted, and he left. We know that they wanted to re-sign Lonzo Ball, and the Bulls got there first. So between the Lakers and LeBron James and the Bulls, there's a little disgruntled nature there. You can by nature you can tell that.
I'm not so sure with the Lonzo Ball thing, because Lonzo's a Rich Paul client.
Right.
Like,
and he ended up signing with the Bulls anyway. So
I think so. My thing with Rich Paul is yeah, I do think he does want to help LeBron out. I would totally give you that. But my thing with Rich Paul is like, I will say this about him: he gets his players his money, and he's gotten some albatross of contracts. Like for one, the John Wall contract.
Mm-hmm.
John Wall is actually his highest paid client. Somebody who is not playing at all.
Mm-hmm.
He is slated to million this year and 47 million next year, and that's a player option, right? And then it's LeBron, and then it's Anthony Davis, Ben Simmons, who we saw how that went down, Draymond, Zach, then Lonzo. So if we're looking at it, like Rich Paul is really going to be the X factor in this. I feel like what he's going to try to do is demand a lot of money, and I know, Zach has played well. He's outperformed the contract that he signed. I'm not even arguing that fact, right? But in going forward, like I think the number that both sides find respectable and agreeable, that's going to be the issue, because is what Zach thinks and what Rich Paul thinks and what AK thinks, are those three different numbers we're talking about? So, if Rich Paul is trying to, get that supermax for Zach, which again, don't blame him for wanting the supermax, but if that's the case, that is really going to handicap the Bulls' flexibility in trying to, who knows what's going to happen the rest of the season, but let's say either help build on a championship contending team or keep a championship contending, or a championship team, right? So really the number is what's most important for what Zach deems as respectable, as well as what also offers flexibility. Now, what I was thinking was maybe they work it out similar to what LeBron, D. Wade, and Chris Bosh did when they all teamed up in Miami, to where technically none of them got the Supermax deal. They all took a little bit of a pay cut to sign some other players, but it was still, you still know they're the best players on the team. So maybe a contract like that is something that Zach would agree to, but we'll have to see going forward.
Well, it bothered me about what he said in the heavy.com, some of the quotes that, he was quoted as and stating, saying that, he knows his news management, but, at the same time, he's going to let his manager handle it. He didn't express any remorse about how he feels about the team that basically been building around him in the past couple years. And I understand what he went through with Garpax, but he got to look at the same time, like he just said, it's a new management, but I wanted him to kind of elaborate on that. The Bulls have really built and tried to put a winning team here for Zach. And just because you're not getting extra amount of money in your pocket at this time, that doesn't mean that this organization hasn't looked out for you and got you some help. And help costs money. And this is the same situation we went through with Jimmy Butler when he was here, Greg. He wanted his money and he wanted a squad around him. But these players don't really understand how difficult that is. I'm not saying that you have to take a huge amount of money off, but you have to at least take into consideration, Greg, that a team can't pay you max and then sign everybody in the league to help you out. And the Bulls spent a lot of money on this help that we have surrounding Zach Lavine.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, but I guess to play a little bit of devil's advocate for you, I think from the player's perspective, I completely understand, right? Like, not everybody can have that max deal. And like you said, to put a contending team, you have to be, have players that are willing to take the veterans minimum if you want to do that. But at the same time, in really across sports in general, you can go to a team where a league where a team can decide to cut you if they really want to, right? Like they can do that, right? Like, and if they deem you a cancer or whatever, if they say you're difficult, whatever, right? Like they can do things to sabotage the amount of money you make, right? Like, and it's not so much just the NBA, right? Like, you get, take Kyrie Irving, for example, right? Like, you get Stephen A. Smith pretty much every day talking about how he would not sign Kyrie to a long-term contract. Basically, every day he's saying this. And, as locked in as he claims to be, right? Like, you have to believe that there's executives who will sit back and be like, you know what? He might have a point, right? So, like, there are other factors that can sabotage the amount of money you make. So if we're looking at that, okay, I do want to maximize my time in the league, especially with your prime, being pretty much the length of that contract, right? Because he was injured at first, so he wasn't going to get the huge deal that he probably would have gotten if he weren't injured. And now, this is his chance. This is probably going to be the biggest contract that he's going to get, right? Like after this is going to be significantly smaller. So I completely understand that he wants his money, but like I said, I understand from the team perspective too, in trying to win a championship or build a championship team, right? Like you have to have some type of financial, and you can't pay everyone, but I'm sure the way Zach looks at it, which is understandable, you got to pay your best player, right? Like that's no brainer, right? Like, and we've talked about on this podcast that Zach is the best player on the team. I know what DeMar is doing, right? Like he's in the MVP conversation, but Zach is the best player, so you got to pay your. So that's kind of the conundrum, but it's even in the article I would say this. We haven't, this was kind of going on before the season started, but we haven't heard anything as far as Zach being disgruntled, Zach worrying about his contract. Like there hasn't been talk about that, and
he's been a total professional.
Yeah, but I mean, as much as everything leaks out, like the days, now that we're in the social media age and everything, like everything leaks out. And if Zach weren't happy or if he was worried about it, I'm sure it would have been a story at some point, right? Like, so the fact that there's nothing kind of gives me hope that they have an understanding. Whether it is the Bulls saying, well, hey, I know you want to test free agency, we'll let you test it, go see, whatever they're going to offer you, and then we'll come back with an offer. Or if they're just like, look, this is the number we're going to give you, or we're going to give you Supermax, or whatever they have. But it's, to me, I would guess that there's some type of idea or agreement they have in place about how it's going to work going forward. So therefore, Zach's not saying anything, or nothing's coming out of this camp, right? Because, if Rich Paul was working behind the scenes, it would have come out like, oh, there's rumors there's Zach trying to get to LA, or Zach going to LA, and then that would have come up. But there's nothing. So that's what kind of gives me hope.
Well, this quote, like the one thing that bothered me the most, and we're going to move on to the next segment, Greg. We don't have too much time tonight. But on a heavy.com, the quote that really bothers me is when Zach stated, I remember everything. And at the same time, I'm going to let my agent handle it. But I remember every single thing. And, the Bulls, the Bulls, and, but I remember, and he just kept saying that. And I'm like, what did he mean by he remembers everything? What are you talking about? So it's like, to me, that quote told me that there is some kind of lingering issue he has with this franchise. And maybe it's not an issue, like you said. Maybe he just wants them to prove to him that he's valued. But to me, he has been valued. I've seen video of AK walking up to him and congratulating him for making his first All-Star team, and I think he brought him a photo of him making the All-Star team his first year, and the whole team just gathered around him, and the whole team respects him. And when you hear the Bulls talk, they always say Zach's in their future. They're building this team around Zach. So I felt like the new management has done their job in making him feel like he's valued, Greg. And I just don't understand why he's like that. And even if it's from the old management, in his head, he has to know that, okay, this is new guys. They treated me different. They brought me some help in here. And he showed some gratitude that, we brought help in here for him. He showed that he's happy about us doing that. And yeah, we brought help in here for you, dude, so we can win. And I just hope he doesn't, not come to our team, but not re-sign with us, because we missed $20 million and we gave him 180 instead of 200. I don't want him to be that petty.
I don't think that would be, like, honestly an issue, because to me, I don't really feel like there's going to be so much of a hard line in the sand.
Yeah, money isn't everything, Greg. Even if he gets the money that he wants, you would want to go to the Kings and leave Chicago and leave the team that you, huh? Go ahead.
I don't think that like AK is gonna have this hard line in the sand and saying like, oh, well, we're not gonna match that number, right? Like I think AK will be pretty transparent and just say like, look, these are the moves we got to make. This is the number that we're thinking, right? Like, and kind of give them the scenario, like, okay, if we give you this, these are the sacrifices we're gonna have to make to the team and things like that, right? Like to really see, like you said, is it about the money or is it about trying to pursue a championship? But I feel like I feel like him saying I remember everything is just him trying to, I guess, send a little subliminal message to a and the owner and the rest of management just saying like, hey, I remember how this last team treated. Like I know, like it's all good. That, like you said, they congratulate him for making the All-Star team and all of that stuff, right? But even in that case, or even bringing in help, right? Like that's still not his money, right? Like it's cool because he was still on that contract, so everything's cool. But like now, this is his money, so it kind of becomes more business. I mean, you know how it goes. Like you gotta be a little bit more cold when it comes to business, regardless of the relationship,
Right.
So I think that's kind of what it is. Like, hey, like I remember how this last management team did me. I didn't forget about that. Like, don't you feel like you can try to pull a fast one over me? Like, I know what that's like. So I know what the warning signs are. So especially being an unrestricted free agent, right? Like that, he has a lot more options than he did prior. So I think that's really what it is. Just kind of saying like, hey, basically being fair, being transparent, or at least that's how I'm reading into it.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the Bulls get back on the court tomorrow against the Atlanta Hawks. Is that correct, Greg?
Yes.
Against the Atlanta Hawks. And we're going to go through not only the game that they start tomorrow, but we're going to go over the team's schedule. How do we think the team is going to do for the second half of the season? And we're going to give our last predictions and our opinions on their latest signing in Tristan Thompson. All of that and more. Don't go anywhere, folks. You want the most uncensored and unbiased podcast? The Bulls Guys Podcast. As only Kenyatta and Greg Love can bring it to you. Follow us on Anchor, YouTube, and all social media platforms. You can use your support.
You're listening to the Bulls Guys Podcast, where we talk about your Chicago Bulls and give an unbiased take. Thank you for listening, and like and subscribe.
How do you feel about the Bulls? How would you like to be on our show, the Bulls Guys Podcast, and give your thoughts on the team? Send us your emails at talkingbulls82@gmail.com, and we'll be glad to have you on. All right, back on the Bulls Guys Podcast. So, Greg, in the first half of the season, the Bulls were phenomenal. I think dealing with everything that they dealt with in the first half of the season, we already spoke about this, the injuries, COVID protocol, everything that the team has dealt with. For us to be tied for the best record in the Eastern Conference at 38-21, I just think is amazing. We finished the first half really, really strong, convincing win over the Sacramento Kings. And the Bulls, stat-wise, did really, really well. 42% as field goals made, 87% from the field as a team, or field goals attempts as a team, 48% as a team from the field. 3 points made, 11 threes per game made. They got to do better, Greg, on that. 28% from three. 37% from three. I'm sorry, Greg. And 28% field goals made. For the most part, the 3-point shooting, Greg, I think is really, really good. The field goal percentage, I feel, is solid at 48%, nearly 50%. As a team, I felt like we shot a little bit too much threes in the first half of the season. And I felt like towards the end, like in the last 10 games, we started to, go to the hole more and draw fouls and getting Vooch involved, getting him his touches in the paint and getting him going. I felt like Vooch really defined himself, and I felt like pairing him with Ao really sparked his game. And then, then now we're gonna have Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso, who both are reported to be back sometime in March, in the middle of March, towards the end of March. Now you bring in Tristan Thompson, a guy to help out Vooch. Vooch has been playing solid defense as well. Hasn't been doing too bad at defense. He's even been started blocking shots now. So I like where this team is at, Greg. I really do like where they're at in the first half. What do you think?
Yeah, I say that definitely given all the injuries and COVID and everything, they definitely overachieved to be as technically second place, but tied with the best record in the East.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I agree with you towards the end of the season when they started posting Vooch more. I think you started to see a lot of the offense starting to flow better.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, you saw like DeMar's numbers started going up, right? Like he had that stretch of 6 games where he was shooting over 50%, which is an NBA record,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that I think Vooch also contributed to that as Vooch was getting down in the post and forcing teams to have to respect him. So I think that definitely contributed to it. Io's been playing great. He definitely deserved to be a part of that All Star weekend. So is Zach and Demar. And going forward, like you said, we're gonna get Caruso back. We're gonna get Lonzo back. Pat Williams is probably gonna be coming back as well. So the second half of the season, especially going into the playoffs, will really be at full strength. So we'll really get a very good look at what this team is going to look like as a playoff team and going forward for the next couple of years too, being at full strength and how formidable they're going to be.
When you talk about effort on the defensive end, I think that matters more than overall what kind of defender you are. And Tristan Thompson, man, when we used to play against him when he played in Cleveland alongside LeBron James, Greg, this guy I could never forget his effort, and he always seemed like he just played angry, like how Kendrick Perkins played, how Kevin Garnett played. That's how Tristan Thompson kind of plays, and I think having him on the box with Vooch is going to be very, very important. Um, I just think, like, Vooch, when you're going to put all the pressure on Vooch to guard everybody that comes to the basket, I think Vooch is a horrible defender when you try, and I think anybody would be a horrible defender, Greg, when you put all the defensive responsibilities on one guy. But pairing Tristan Thompson with Vooch, do you think that will better our inside game? I think it will, because Vooch has shown that he's improved defensively. He's blocking shots. For the first time, like beginning of the season, I didn't see him block any shots. Now he's blocking shots left and right. Now you put a younger Tristan Thompson next to him at 30 years old that's, still plays younger than even 30, that has a lot of energy, that plays with brute force, that plays with anger. I like it. I like it, Greg. And then you bring in Derrick Jones Jr., who recently returned not too long ago. I think our front court is going to be very much improved defensively.
Yeah, I think with Tristan Thompson, and you put it a lot nicer about how he was in Cleveland. To me, he was just annoying. The reason why was he just had a nose for the ball, man. Like you get down there and you look like, oh, okay, that's gonna be an easy rebound, and then here he comes. Even if he doesn't rebound it, he's tipping it out and doing something. It was just annoying just to watch his effect, like not rooting for Cleveland, right? Like it was just annoying. But yeah, excuse me, bringing that to the Bulls, pairing that with Vooch, I think it'll really help defensively. It'll take some of that pressure off of Vooch because, like you said, having all of that on one guy to basically you have to be the rim protector, especially with that not being your game, right? Like it's difficult to do. Now you have somebody who, at the very least, is going to help you with that, right? So instead of taking the whole lane, okay, we can split it in half, right? Like this is a much easier task to do. So I think that adding, getting those extra loose balls, those tip outs, all of that stuff, that's really going to contribute. And then, like you said, having Caruso back along with Javante, Lonzo, Io, pressuring
Derrick
the ball
Jones Jr.
handlers, Derrick Jones, right? Like, it gives our lineup versatility as well, right? Like, because if you're switching out, you play Tristan and Derrick together. You could play Derrick and Vooch again. You can play, all these. You can play around with the lineup now, so it's not so obvious, right? Like, and I think that versatility will especially help on the defensive end.
All right, so now let's go into the Chicago Bulls schedule coming up. We know that they open up the second half of the season against the Atlanta Hawks, Greg. They also have Memphis and Miami in the Miami Heat and their first 3 games coming back. But you have their whole 10-game schedule mapped out in the next 10 games.
So like you said, we got Atlanta tomorrow night. Saturday at home against Memphis. Monday, we travel down to Miami. That following Thursday, we travel to Atlanta. Friday, March 4th, we're home versus Milwaukee. Monday, March 7th, we head to Philly. A couple of revenge games, really. I mean, it's other than Atlanta, these are all going to be revenge games. Then we got Detroit. We're at Detroit. Then we're playing Cleveland on March 12th. March 14th, we're at Sacramento. March 16th, we're at Utah. March 18th, we are at Phoenix. Then Monday, March 24th, we are home versus Toronto.
That's a tough schedule, man. The only easy game that you called out, Greg, was Detroit and the Kings. Like, my God.
Yeah, they're gonna go through the ringer. Like, realistically, the rest of the season, you have maybe 3 easy games, maybe 4. Like you said, Detroit, Sacramento, maybe that's easy. They got New Orleans. We'll see. New York, Washington, maybe. Or kind of based on how they're playing, man. But that's really it. The rest, we're talking playoff teams are floating around in the hunt. So it's gonna be tough going forward. We're gonna really see what these Bulls are made of.
I was going to try to give a record, man, but I can't give a record on that type of schedule, man. Worst case scenario, we know the 2 games that they're going to win. But better yet, man, I mean, I can't even say the Kings are going to be easy because the Kings kind of battled us pretty tough at that game, at that last game, setting off the first half of the season, Greg.
Yeah.
That wasn't no gimme game. We really had to tussle with them until like about the last 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So, well, that's that. When we come back, we're going to close out the show. We're going to give our greetings and our good nights right after this. You want the most uncensored and unbiased podcast? The Bulls Guys Podcast. As only Kenyatta and Greg Love can bring it to you. Follow us on Anchor, YouTube, and all social media platforms. You can use your support. How do you feel about the Bulls? How would you like to be on our show, The Bulls Guys Podcast, and give your thoughts on the team? Send us your emails at talkingbulls82@gmail.com, and we'll be glad to have you on. All right, Greg, end of the show. Another one in the books for our Chicago Bulls fans. Also, Bulls fans, if you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe down below. It will really help us to bring you great content in the future. Helps the podcast keep on running, and it supports us as podcasters. We really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for listening. Greg?
Yeah, thank you for following us. Thank you for tuning in with us every week. Please share with anybody. Share with your fans, your friends, your grandmama, whoever. Please share. Whoever you got, your co-workers. Please, just get the word out because, we're trying to bring you great content, and we're just trying to get our podcast out there, get our voices heard, and, thank you for sticking with us. And I know I kind of say this every time, but, thanks for hanging in there with us. And thanks for, continuing to roll with us. And we got great stuff coming in the future.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Bulls fans. We'll see you tomorrow night. We're gonna do a podcast for that one, right, Greg? For the tomorrow's opening.
Yep, and I'll say this: either you didn't want to give a record. I'm gonna go the last 23 games. I think they get 15 to 16 wins.
That's a bold statement, Greg.
Yeah. I got faith, especially with people coming back. I think they can get about 15.
Well, you could be right, man. Because defensively, I think we're gonna be a different team, man. I think this Bulls team, when they show up, can beat anybody. You know, it's the games that they not showing up and not playing like themselves that I think they're vulnerable against anyone. But good show. Thank you for joining us tonight. Also, like I said, like and subscribe, please. It helps us keep bringing great content. Thank you for joining us tonight, Chicago. Go Bulls.